So I think out of all the things I could share, the most important is what I've learned in terms of getting rid of this stuff. Not that lawns are the worst thing in the world, although they're pretty bad. It's kind of ridiculous. I guess the United States uses more fertilizer to fertilize their lawns than the country of India uses to fertilize all of its agricultural crops, which is a pretty mind-boggling statistic. And of course, it's the number one most irrigated crop in terms of area of an irrigated crop in the United States. That includes like vegetables and stuff that we actually need. Of course, this lawn doesn't really get any of that stuff, so it doesn't really produce the most beautiful, perfect grass in the world. But nonetheless, it doesn't really provide anything to me. And so, is the garbage truck intrusion. So I'm turning it into garden beds, and we're gonna grow plants that are useful. So if you have the time and energy, the best is to dig it out with a shovel and make these big, loose, raised beds. Now, it seems like a lot more work than it actually is once you get the ergonomics right. And this has taken me years of trial and error to figure out how to use a shovel. I'm sure many people grew up using a shovel. I did as well, but I grew up using it in a way that hurts my back. So now I have a different way, at least for making garden beds like this. And you don't have to do this. I could have just, because I have access to this mulch, I could have just laid it out right on the ground in a really super thick layer and waited over winter, and then maybe broad forked it or something and planted in something that's going to take over the space really well. But if you want to accelerate the process, you can come in here, and I kind of work on the edge, and the shovel will just take these little slices, really, 3 inches, 4 inches maybe, and you push down into the soil, and it's kind of, the shovel's going more or less up or down, and then you lever it like this, and then you just pop it over. So I'm not bending over. I'll probably post another video with someone else filming me so you can actually see the process a little bit better. But that's all that happens here. It's just this slicing off the edges, little chipping away at it piece by piece, and then I'm not really lifting much soil. I'm just kind of flopping it over to the side. So my back is perfectly straight this whole time, and is mostly just leverage of the shovel that's doing the work. And so it's fairly pleasant, to be honest. It's not like I'm lifting a pile of something and making it, moving material higher much. It's more just this levering action, which is really not that bad. So anyway, I'm just taking all of those slices, and the only part where I did lift is right on the edge here. I dig out that last bit as a trench, and that goes around the entire perimeter of the space, and that little bit gets flipped into the middle. So there's a little bit of lifting there, but eventually these trenches are where I will be walking, and I'm going to fill them with organic material, in this case hay or wood chips, and they'll break down over time, and in a couple years those will get moved into the bed as well to make it even deeper and fluffier. But so right now it is October 20th or something like that. This work could happen anytime but really any time of the year that the ground isn't frozen. It kind of doesn't matter, because the plan here is to pile all this sod up and cover it with really as much hay as I can spare, but it could be wood chips, it could be any organic material. It could even be a tarp, although I'm less excited about tarping as the years go by, because it really doesn't activate the soil very much. When you have something organic that's breaking down, hay, for example, has a lot of nitrogen. It's a high protein feed for animals that in this case was left in the farmer's fields for too long and started rotting and is no longer good for them. So you can get it pretty cheap. And that has a lot of nitrogen, has a lot of nutrients, and as it breaks down, the earthworms will go in here, and they'll have a crazy party over the winter, and we'll come here in the spring and we'll see that all of this sod, you know, there will be earthworm castings kind of all throughout this, and this will probably kill 99% of the sod over the winter as it breaks down with fungus and bugs and things like that. And we'll probably just have a huge loose pile of soil with lots of worm castings in it in the spring, and we can just pop in any kind of plants that suit the area. If you had a little bit more time and energy before you mulched the top, or maybe you could put a little bit of mulch and then some compost and then more mulch on top of that. I'm not gonna do that because all of my compost is much lower in the landscape and I would have to bring up wheelbarrow loads up a really steep hill, and I just don't feel like it, and this will probably be just fine anyway. So these beds over here are a little bit different because that tree fell down over there, and I put a lot of the branches on the ground and then did this digging out thing similarly, piled it on top of the branches and then covered that with hay. So this area is probably going to be a pretty wild garden next spring, and this is really minimal tillage. I don't need a rototiller, I don't need a tractor. It's literally just a shovel and a hay fork. So this is, I think, probably the best way to get rid of your lawn. Just go for it. Find a spot. The reason I chose this spot, this is entrance of the house here, and there's a couple parking spots in front of the house. So one path is this one in the middle, so I wanted to keep that. And then another path is this one over here that goes to that parking spot. And so the spaces in the middle, you can see they're not trampled down at all. And so those areas are just kind of not used. They don't really need any access. And so it's best to turn those into productive spaces.